All right, welcome everyone. Thanks again for joining us for another session of job search strategies here at NC State during our collaborative summer A to I virtual session. Please join me in welcoming Assistant Dean for Graduate Professional Development and my good colleague Suprawi Tepsuporn from University of Delaware. So as we welcome her, please use the chat to introduce yourselves and to let Suprawi know where you're coming from. And hopefully we've got some University of Delaware with us today as well. So Suprawi, with that, I'll let you go ahead and take over. So thanks so much and looking forward to today's talk.
Thank you, Joe and Morgan, and thank you for including me in this amazing JSS session that you always hold. And thank you everyone for joining us. I see 80 participants, so that's a great number, and hello to all of you. And it's a rainy day here in Delaware, so I hope the weather is nicer and warmer where you are. So let me share my screen and I'll do all right. So today, I'm going to be sharing tips and strategies and best practices on preparing and having an effective salary negotiation conversation. Our learning goals for today are, hopefully by the end of the workshop, you'll be able to name key salary negotiation preparation steps and know best practices for negotiating your compensation. Before we get started, I have a quick poll. If we can just see a yes in the chat or short comments in the chat, that would be great. So the first question is, where are you in your job search? Are you currently job searching, or will you be in the next 3 to 6 months, or you're here to learn and preparing for over a year from now for your job search? I'm gonna look at the chat too. Just starting, here to learn, a few job searching, currently job searching. All right, so we have a combination of folks who are here to learn, and those who are currently job searching or will be soon. So I hope this is going to be helpful, and Joe will have a slide deck as well. So you have the slide deck as your references in the future as well. Some of the slides would be quite text heavy because I've gotten so many requests from students to have exact phrases written out. So bear that in mind. Next question is, have you negotiated salaries before? Yes, no. No, never. We got one yes, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So like Kimberly said, no, and the thought terrifies me. It terrifies most people. So you're not alone, and we're here in it together. Yes, it is stressful, Joe. Definitely. I think negotiation conversation can be more stressful than actually the actual interview for some people. All right. So a lot of no and a lot of fear around negotiation. And from a scale of 1 to 5, how confident are you with your negotiation skills? 1 being not confident at all, and 5 being I'm really good. See a lot of 1 to 3, 2.5, 3. Okay. 2 to 3, 4. Great. 2. Okay. So not super confident. And we got a few 4s and 3s in there. So I hope there's lots of room for learning for everyone here. So why should you negotiate? I get asked this question a lot, especially from students who may be pursuing their first job. We should negotiate because some employers just expect you to negotiate, and they may start your salary offer lower than they could offer you, because that allows them room for negotiation and having the perception of that they actually gave you more than what they originally have. And the next reason is employers want their top candidates to be happy and accept the offer and stay with them. One thing that is very unproductive and costs a lot for employers is when their top performer leave, and when they lose people they've spent time training. So now they have to retrain, recruit new people. That time lag is really unproductive for employers. So they want to make sure they get a good person in, the best person they could, and help them to be happy and productive in their workplace. And another key point of why negotiation is important is that your starting salary determines your raise and potential lifetime earnings. And in industry where bonuses is common, bonuses are typically calculated based on your base salary. So if your base salary is higher, then your bonuses is more, and that your potential lifetime earnings is higher. So keep that in mind. Once there's a lot of inertia around staying in one place, right? Moving is hard, job searching is hard. If we don't have to ever do it again, it would be great. So we might stay at an organization for a very long time. And if you start really low, instead of where you could be in that organization, your salary and compensation is going to be depressed for that time period if you stay with an organization for 10, 15, 20 years, right? So it has a huge effect that could potentially affect your financial well-being tremendously. And the next point is, candidates do not typically negotiate. I have to convince many students to negotiate their offer because they said, well, I don't like to be confrontational. People don't want to be confrontational, right? And they are afraid of rejection. Candidates are typically afraid of rejection. If I ask for more than they offer me, would I lose the job, right? That's a very common misconception around negotiation. And the fear of negotiating poorly, it might come back to bite us, those fears around not doing something well. So I want to say that both sides can win if you negotiate well. And the rejection piece, they already want you. They just maybe haven't showed how much they want you because you are entering the negotiation phase. So I rarely see in my entire career, this is my second career, but this career of advising graduate students and postdoc, there was one withdraw from reneging of an offer after a candidate negotiate, and that's after hundreds, nearly probably thousands of jobs that have helped students acquire, and that scenario has nothing to do with the negotiation. It has something to do with external forces within the organization that the position is no longer available. So they want you to be happy. So go ahead and be brave and negotiate. And that's why we're here. If you're fearful that you may not negotiate well, I'm here to share some tips and strategies to prepare. So when does salary negotiation conversation occur? So there's a few steps along your candidacy that salary negotiation occur. It can start as early as when you apply for that position online, submitting your application in the portal. Sometimes organization would have a question: what's your expected salary? Sometimes it's occur during the first phone screen with HR. They may say, we have budgeted X amount, would that work for you? Or they may just ask again, what's your salary expectation? It can happen during an in-person / virtual interview with the hiring manager. And it can happen, in best case scenario, it would only happen when you already receive a job offer. They call and tell you, hi, Jamie, congratulations, we want to extend an offer for this position at this company at this amount. So that's best case scenario, but know that there would be points throughout your interviewing and recruitment process that you may be asked salary negotiation question. And in a few minutes, we'll talk about how to handle different points, how to tackling those type of questions. So I'm going to move into how do we prepare for salary negotiation conversation now. So the first step is to research the organization, the team, and the industry. Comb through the job description again, make sure you understand what the role is about, research the employer, understand the industry, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. How has the industry changed? What are the shifts? Are there new products and services or demands from their customers or the business that they services? What does that mean to be in this industry, in this organization, in this team? And in terms of the salary negotiation piece, this is when you can have a sense of what is the culture and expectation. What are the options you could ask for? What are the possibilities, right? One of the things that I would also recommend is using your professional network to find information and then help you do research. People who are in industry, even though they may not be at that organization, they may know information that are available through personal connections, through meetings and coffee chats at virtual coffee chats at professional association meetings, etc. So really do your research, the organization, the company, and how you meet or exceed the expectation of the role. Next is researching compensation. I cannot stress how important this is. And in all of what we're going to talk together today, I would say preparation is probably 80% of the work in the salary negotiation piece, and it can take a lot of time. One thing that I haven't mentioned is, when do you start preparing? I would say as soon as you have that, ideally as soon as when you have that first phone screen, because things can move very fast depending on the industry. If you have your first phone screen, you may be invited for next round interview in 2 days and get an offer the next week. Like, it can go really that fast. So you want to be prepared. In other industry, it can take 6 months, it can take 9 months, right? So you never know. And then I'm speaking in general terms here, not knowing where everyone is in their search process. So keep that in mind, that this research piece can take longer than you think it might. And the tools listed here are ways that you could find out information for a typical salary for that position in your geographical location. It is important to know what's the minimum salary that you've seen shared, say on salary.com or Glassdoor for that position, say a research scientist in Austin, Texas, right, at company X. What is that? What's the minimum number? And look at the look at the competitors as well. If you looking at pharmaceutical company A, but in the area there's 3 or 4 other competitor of that company, what is their compensation package? What's the maximum number that you see? You'll be able to see a range, and keep in mind that the salary information on PayScale, Glassdoor, and Salary.com are typically self-reported. So when you see a salary range from, say, 70,000 to 140,000, that's a really big range, right? And where do you fall in that? Sometimes it has to do with the number of years of experience. So if that person has been in that role for 10 years, their salary at 10 year may be 140. But if you're just going in for your 0 to 1 year, what is that range? So keep that in mind, that that number has a caveat of what it means. Again, depending on the industry that you're looking at, in higher education, organization website like University of Delaware would have a salary structure with a minimum, midpoint, and maximum for that grade range. And some company would have a pay band that you can look at, or a salary grade, so you have a sense of what the range may be. The US government has a salary scale for each position, for example. So check the organization website as well. And check the organization website for other perks and benefits. Sometimes they share the cost for medical, dental, and vision coverage, other paid time off, if you're having a child, leave policy, free gyms, like those things counts for a lot, right? And I used to live in Boston for a long time, and people even negotiate for parking spots or subsidized parking because it costs $400 to park a month in downtown Boston. So if you don't have to spend that $400, that would be pretty sweet, right? You may not have that money in your pocket, but you don't have to spend that. So just look at a compensation as a big in a big picture, the forest from the tree, right? What does it mean to go in and live in that particular location, that lifestyle, that quality of life perks that organizations may be providing. And here are some tools for understanding differences in cost of living. If you are moving to a new location, moving home, or moving to a new city, new town, these are really great resources to understand, to help you better get a sense of whether the salary that's offered is competitive. Will you be able to, if you have multiple children, etc., what the living cost is like, and what you're hoping to make, say at Raleigh area, would likely be different in Madison, in San Francisco, in Georgia, in Atlanta, right? So keep that in mind, that the number varies, and your purchasing power may change, most likely change based on where you're living. Next, I would recommend, refamiliarizing yourself with the position you apply to. Review the job description, your application document, look at the notes from your interviews. Think about what separates you from the other candidate. What can you go above and beyond that job description? Sometimes during the interview, we learn that actually having skill set in data visualization or project management or program evaluation would be so amazing for this team, but it's not listed in a job posting because they haven't thought that the person coming into this role would have those skill set. So those are things you can bring up as, the value you're bringing into an organization. And I would also prepare narratives around your technical as well as your human skills. Of course, if you know how to code, like I said, data visualization, analysis, and data analytics, big data, all those technical things are amazing. But there are other skills that also highly value in the world of work, which are, your ability to collaborate, work in cross-disciplinary teams, your communication skill, both written and verbal, your creative problem-solving skill, your project management skills. All those things are highly valued and can be used as a case for your salary negotiation. Next, it is important to know what you want. As you're preparing for your salary negotiation conversation, decide and prioritize item you want to negotiate. Don't have a list of 15 things you're going to ask. It's unlikely to work that way unless maybe you're applying to chief technology officer position, or chief operating officers like COO, CFO, 10-15 years from now. The negotiation can go on for weeks and months, but as early career scientists going in, we don't have that much leverage yet. So decide and prioritize what really matters to you, know what you're willing to accept, and determine your deal breakers and items you're willing to compromise. Not everything is about money, right? So this is when knowing what is important to you is really key. And, doing a little bit of budgeting to know, okay, would this meet my financial commitment, my financial obligations? That would be really important as well. And as I mentioned before, justify your request based on how you meet or exceeds their needs, whether that's based on your technical skills or human skills. Next, it's important to practice articulating your narrative. I find that practicing your ask out loud can be really helpful. We're not used to asking for things in our lives. So, practice how you're going to say it. Does it make sense? And a lot of times from the women that I've worked with, they say, well, I don't feel comfortable asking for that, right? So I don't want to sound pushy. I don't want to sound bossy. I don't want to sound unfriendly or aggressive. So practice and the tone of voice and the word you choose are really important in these conversations. So think about phrasing and have the spirit of transparency during your conversation and have confidence around going into these conversations, even though it's really scary and nerve-wracking. And another key thing is think about how you would respond when you hear the other party's responses. It may be a yes, no, or it may be, what about this? What about that? Think about how you would navigate those conversations in advance can help move the conversation in a positive direction. I'm going to pause here and love to hear if there's any questions about the preparation steps so far, or any key takeaways folks like to share. I see a question about for a lot of government jobs, salary is a matter of public record and are posted online. So you can search for others who are similar role to what you are applying for, or even how much the last person who had your job was paid. Yes, great point. Thanks for sharing that. And Joe, you mentioned Lauren asks, given the vast variations in job titles, often based on company, what is the best way to navigate researching compensation? great question. So search based on related positions. So, sometimes it's research scientist, sometimes it's research associate, so this is when this is what I mean by it's going to take time to determine what's a comparable position in a different company might be, what's the right level. And that comes from, conversations with your professional contacts, doing web search on with the organization website to understand the structure. There isn't a hard and fast rule about this, but it needs some efforts and research. Other question. There was a question about how to negotiate on academic positions at, I assume as professor, like a tenure track professor position. That's a whole other ball game, and what I'm sharing here is more negotiation in a general sense. There would be points that could apply to, it's really negotiation in life, really, with a good dose of salary negotiation. In terms of academic positions, there's just a lot more you could ask for in many ways. Your starting package, your office, your lab space. I would actually refer you to faculty in your institution or department about that, because it would require another workshop to talk about what you could ask for and in that. Does every job allow you to negotiate on things such as health insurance, vacation time, and other small things, or is that job specific? Great question. We will come up on a list of items you could negotiate and non-negotiable items in about 3 slides. So we'll tackle that then. Okay. So during negotiation, something that I didn't write on here is, if possible, try to have this conversation in person or over the phone, not through text, not through email, because you can start to understand the other person better. It's much harder to do that in person and over the phone. I totally agree. But without hearing the tone of voice, the pause, the facial expression, a lot can be lost in written communication. And I find that when you negotiate via email, let's say, once they say no to your request, it's really hard to reopen that box again, because it was already a hard no. You can't be picking at it. But when you have a conversation, you can ask clarifying questions. They can ask you clarifying questions. So best practices is doing it in person, whether that in 2-dimension or 3-dimension. And I would recommend starting your negotiation conversation with small talks. Find commonality with your negotiation counterpart. What a nice day, great shirt. Start with something friendly. Research have shown that negotiations are the outcome of a negotiation is much more favorable for both parties when they start with some friendly small talks first. And another key thing is try to observe and mirror your counterpart communication styles, positive communication styles, that is. So, the level of formality, the pace, whether they share jokes, right? So this is a little bit also as part of an interviewing process. They are trying to assess whether this candidate is going to fit into the organization well. So mirroring those type of communication styles can subconsciously address those things that interviewers or the hiring managers may be looking for. Another key thing is, as we all already probably tense going into negotiation conversation, right? It's important to take a breath, pause. You don't always have to answer. Don't say okay. You can say, let me think about it, right? And remain positive and forward thinking. Think of negotiation conversation as you are problem solving this together as a team. It's not you versus me, us against them type thing. We're working to come to an agreement that's positive for both parties. And ask for time to consider options. You don't need to agree right away, and make sure to have everything in writing. And this point also extends to the question about academic offers. Make sure you have all those things in writing from the chair of the department, because if it's not written and the chair leave before you actually start your job, your offer may be different, because that's just one person's words to you, as opposed to a written document that is enforceable through university faculty affairs, human resources. So keep that in mind, and check all the details, right? Talking about having everything in writing, make sure they calculate vacation times correctly. It happens to me multiple times. My offers, all the vacations are calculated incorrectly. So be detail oriented when you do these things. Back to the question earlier, items you might be able to negotiate on. So base salary, of course, start date, bonuses, whether that's sign on or performance bonus, relocation expense assistance, flex time, telecommuting. Those are becoming more and more common since the pandemic. If you need professional development, if you need support for, that faculty writing support or grant writing support, those are assistance you could ask for as well. And depending on the industry, ask for severance, stock options, etc. So I hope this gives you a sense of common items candidates can negotiate on. And the non-negotiable items, so these are typically set for the organization. So it's not for one employee to the next. So you can choose plans, but the plans are pretty much set based on negotiation with insurance company, for example. And pay time off, that's pretty much set for the organization. Sometimes it's tiered based on years of service, etc. Retirement program, they might be matching contribution from the employer. So that's a really good perk. Make sure to read up on that as you make your decision, especially when you're comparing one organization to the next. Flexible spending account, tuition reimbursement, if they have the program, you can take advantage of it. But it's unlikely to be something you could ask for if there isn't something already in place for that. I hope this addressed your question. And then, okay, big question. How do we tackle salary negotiation requirement question, right? And remember, we may be asked in our online application. We may be asked during phone screen or for the rounds of interviews or during the offer stage. So there's 3 strategies. And I would say that depending on your comfort level and personality, you may choose one type over the other. I'm just here to share what those are. And sometimes it's really in the moment. When you're in that moment of negotiation, you may recall, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna go down this path. And so I hope this gives you some tools to navigate those type of conversation. So the first approach is to defer. This is very helpful when you have not done your research or haven't completed your research to be able to say what the number is. A typical answer would be, I expect to be compensated at a rate that is commensurate with my education and experience. You don't have to disclose the number. You are just deferring sharing that information. And you can ask, like the last bullet point, I have some ideas in mind. I like to know if you have budget you are trying to work with. So it's a way to engage in conversation. And I hope this first point demonstrates the importance of having salary negotiation in person, right? You're unlikely to be going back and forth like this over email. It can be much more tiring than actually having a phone call with someone. The next approach is to inquire. They may ask you, what's your salary expectation? And you ask back, what do you have in mind? It's unlikely they're going to come back and say to you, no, you go first, right? At this point, they will likely answer your question. We've budgeted X amount, etc. And another thing is that they're asking your previous salary or what you currently make is illegal in, I think, 17 states. So you don't need to disclose that information necessarily. They may ask you, what do you currently make now? You can say, could you please let me know in which context you will use this information? If they're going to use that information to pin you, a pin where your salary is, you don't need to disclose that to them, especially when you might be switching industry. If you are working in nonprofit, that's not paid as well as, say, in the financial sector, right? So when you say I'm making, say, $60,000, but doing that same job in a for-profit Fortune 500 company, maybe it's already starting at, say, I'm making numbers up, 90,000. And if you say you're making 60, maybe they only going to pay you 70,000, and you're missing out on 20,000 of what they would normally pay without any question, right? So I would say share information on a need-to-know basis in terms of salary conversation. And you can engage in conversation with your counterpart, especially if the person is the hiring manager. You can say, if you were in my shoes, what would you have asked for this role? With or without information that you may have had based on your research. The next approach is sharing what you need. This takes lots of guts, and you better be sure your research is solid, right? If you're going to share a specific amount, it should meet all your financial obligation and is the value that you've seen reported in all those tools that I mentioned earlier. So, and I recommend sharing a specific amount over a range, because when you say 65,000 to 70,000, and you're really hoping for 70, the counterparts here are 65. That's just human nature. So if you want 70,000, say 70,000, or if you really want 70,000, maybe you say 75, because they may negotiate you down, right? So there's really nuanced conversation around sharing. And for those of you who may have experience taking negotiation class from business schools, this is called anchoring. You're anchoring that value first, and there's a lot of advantage for sharing that number first as well. It takes guts, it takes lots of research, but sharing that number first, if you're sharing 70,000, they're not going to say, oh, it's 55. But if they share 55 first, it's going to be really hard to try to pull someone from 55,000 to 70,000, for example. So keep that in mind as you are preparing for your conversation and do your research well. I cannot emphasize that enough. Do your research, prepare, practice. Okay, the final decision. Make sure to contact the employer to accept the offer and confirm every detail in writing. Have it in writing, review it again and again, maybe sleep on it overnight to make sure it's really what you wanted. And if you have other pending offers or in line for other interviews, if you accepted offer, it is best practice to inform other organizations to turn down their offer or withdraw yourself from the interview process. So you don't leave people hanging or mislead other people. However, you do not need to reveal any details about the offer you accepted. You may just say, I've decided to do X. You don't have to say how much money, what's the position, what's the organization. They may find out about where you're going on LinkedIn at a later date, but it's not something you have to share or justify why you are saying no to someone. And remain professional and appreciative. Remember, it's a no for now. It's no for this year that I'm looking for a job in the next few years, but maybe the next time I'm job searching, I'll be thinking of this organization, especially if you had positive experience during your interview or interaction with them. And a lot of what I share so far is very business oriented, and in the employer's decision could be a business one, but yours don't have to be, right? Again, I would encourage you to reconnect with your values. What's really important to you? Look at the big picture. Think about your long-term goals. Will you enjoy the job? You're going to be doing this 40 plus hours a week. Are you going to be suffering, right? We don't want that. We want you to have meaningful, fulfilling career. About the position, how will you learn and grow? Are you going to strengthen existing skills that you have? Are you going to build new skills, new network, new knowledge? How important are those things to you? And are there any other quality of life aspects that you want to consider? How's the commute? How's the city? Will I be close to my family, or how far away would I be from my family, depending on what you need, right? And is your mission aligned with the mission of the organization? Do you believe in what they do? We want our trainees to have positive impact in the world, and does that match with what is important to you as you're making all these life decisions? And I will share this wisdom that one of my mentors shared with me. When you make a decision, be clear why you chose to do that. It might not be, there isn't one right answer, but if you can justify to yourself, I chose this at that time because 1, 2, 3, there's likely to be any regrets in the future. Just be clear of what matters to you, what's important to you, and go from there. So that's all I have for now. I see lots of questions, so I hope there's time for questions. We have a few minutes together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you to all of our students and postdocs that joined us. And so please join me in thanking Supra Wee.